All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, there's been a lot of attention paid to the CCP in the last several months as Xi Jinping carefully choreographed the latest party congress, where he proclaimed leader of China for life. The incident, which has gotten the most attention, which he covered here, was the escorting of former President Hu Jintao out of the room. But what I've been paying closer attention to is not Xi, but the people around him. The people who are assuming power and what they believe. One of the great misconceptions about China is that it's a total dictatorship of one man. It is a total dictatorship, but it is much more like the former Soviet Union, where the government has all-consuming power, but is also divided up into very complex factions, each with their own agendas, ideologies, and worldviews. In the Cold War, we used to call that Kremlinology, intense analysis by the Western press into the individual outlooks of important Politburo members. It wouldn't be uncommon, actually, for average Americans who read the papers in the 50s to know the names of senior Politburo members, and for some reason, though, we don't seem to do the same with China, even though it is many times more powerful than the Soviet Union ever was, and obviously is a far more competent state. So I thought I would highlight a central figure for all of you, who, perhaps more than Xi Jinping himself, embodies how Chinese elites think about us and the danger it will pose in the future to the globe. I was inspired to do this monologue after seeing the news from the South China Morning Post. Chinese ideology czar Wang Huning, an already existing member of the Politburo Standing Committee, is going to be promoted to officially head the National People's Congress. Wang is already number 5 in the CCP pecking order, but the latest promotion effectively makes him number 2 or 3, with even more control over party affairs. It's a random name to see, unless you know a little bit about him, which I happen to, and I'm personally terrified to see this. Ever since I read a profile of Wang Huning last year and his musings about China and the United States, I've been very worried that he will assume even more power. Wang is already the architect of the CCP's stated plans, from the Chinese Dream, the One Belt One Road Initiative, Made in China 2025, and Xi Jinping Thought, the fusion of traditional Chinese communism with Xi Jinping's cult of personality. Wang was forged in the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, and he exited college with a central idea, that a society must be controlled at all levels. In his game-changing essay titled The Structure of China's Changing Political Climate, he wrote that the CCP must, quote, urgently consider how society's software, its cultural values, attitudes, and shapes their political destiny as much as its, quote, hardware, like economic systems and institutions. He wrote in 1988, breaking from the prevailing consensus in China. He said that socialism with Chinese characteristics was nothing more than a, quote, materially oriented culture, and he decried a break from collectivist culture to individualism. Wang wrote that, in essential, that a modern China break from the classic and modern values of the West and must forge its own core values. And it was in the same year that he decided to set out to create them. He wanted to start in a country which he viewed himself as an opponent of. He traveled to the United States in 1988, and he embarked on a national tour here in the US of more than 30 cities and more than 20 universities. And he eventually compiled his observations into a book. It's titled America Against America, and it was written in 1991. The observations of the book, especially considering it was written before I was even born, are shocking. Wang writes that, quote, America faces an unstopped undercurrent of crisis produced by its societal contradictions between rich and poor, white and black, democratic and oligarchic power. He says that Americans are not blind and can see their social and cultural problems, but their issue is they tend to think of them as scientific or technological problems that can be solved. He says, ultimately America will fail because all of our problems stem from the same rot, quote, a radical nihilistic individualism at the heart of American individualism. He writes, quote, in the American system, everything has a dual nature. The glamour of high commodification abounds. Human flesh, sex, knowledge, politics, power, the law can all become the target of commodification. This commodification in many ways corrupts society and leads to a number of serious social problems. He adds, in the end, the American economic system has created human loneliness as its foremost product, along with spectacular inequality. As a result, nihilism has become the American way. It is a fatal shock to the cultural development and the American spirit. Wang eventually concludes two things. America cannot solve its own problems, and China must do everything in its power to resist and supplant the West. Wang's book hit right after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, when the CCP fully embraced its role as the keeper of the party for eternity, not of the people. And from there, his career took off. He became the consigliere to 3 successive Chinese presidents, and in his nearly 30 years in power, Wang has consistently rallied against westernization of China, from banning socially undesirable trends on their version of TikTok to heavily censoring their internet, promoting values on their tech platforms that comply only with the CCP. Wang was mostly in the minority of his view until when Xi Jinping came in power in 2012, and since then they have fit hand in glove. China's moves to ban gaming at night, censor its people heavily, embrace zero COVID despite its economic costs, it all stems from the same obsession: control of the population, expunging westernized notions of individuality, capitalism, any rival center of power outside of the government. It is this central view which guides Wang, by extension, Xi, as they enter this unprecedented situation. Two rival superpowers with the capability to destroy the world many times over, with completely different visions of the world and their own societies and how they should even look. To me, his ascension to near total power shows us that at the very least, the old dream is dead. Any notion of economic ties doing anything to turn China away from authoritarianism is fantasy. The longer we pretend that ties between our two countries economically are mutually beneficial in any way, the more we fulfill the old prophetic quote of Vladimir Lenin, that capitalists will sell the communists the rope which with the way will hang us. They have a very clear idea of who they are, of who they want to be, and a world which allows them to do whatever they want. We, by contrast, only have fulfilled Wang's prophecy, a radically individualistic society incapable of solving or even paying attention to its worst pathologies as we eat each other alive. Perhaps we have enough time to turn it around. We certainly have in the past. But it's a hell of a gamble when you face adversaries as powerful and as prescient as Wang Huning. I just think what he wrote in '91 is crazy.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.